There was a time in America when a sandwich wasn't a choice. It was survival. Long before drive-thrus and overstuffed deli counters, families opened nearly empty cupboards and still found a way to put something, anything, between two slices of bread. In cold farmhouses, crowded factory towns, and dusty rural roads, these humble creations kept children fed and workers standing. They weren't glamorous. They weren't trendy. But they carried families through the Great Depression, wartime rationing, and seasons of quiet hardship. Today, we're uncovering 10 forgotten poor man sandwiches your grandparents once ate to survive, and the powerful stories they still hold. Lard sandwich, the taste of bare survival. Before flavor, before comfort, before choice, there were calories. And for many families during the worst years of the Great Depression, survival began with something as simple and as stark as a lard sandwich. In rural America, especially across Appalachia and the Dust Bowl plains, money was scarce and meat was precious. Nothing from a hog was wasted. After butchering season, fat was slowly rendered down into lard and stored in crocks for the long winter months. It was meant for cooking, for biscuits, for stretching meals. But on the hardest days, it became the meal itself. A slice of bread, sometimes homemade, sometimes stale, would be spread with a thin layer of white lard. If a family was fortunate, a pinch of salt was added. In sweeter moments, a sprinkle of sugar. That was it. No protein. No vegetables. Just dense calories meant to quiet the sharp edge of hunger. To modern ears, it sounds unthinkable. But for farm laborers waking before sunrise, for children walking miles to one-room schoolhouses, that simple sandwich provided enough energy to endure the day. It wasn't about taste. It was about making it through. Older generations rarely spoke fondly of lard sandwiches, but they remembered them clearly. They represented winters that felt endless and fields that yielded too little. Yet they also represented resilience, the refusal to waste, the determination to feed a family no matter how thin the pantry looked. Between two slices of bread, there was no luxury. Only survival. And sometimes, survival was enough. Onion sandwich. A working man's lunch. There was a time when the sharp scent of raw onion drifting from a metal lunch pail meant one thing. Someone was determined to make it through the day. In the early 20th century, across coal mines, textile mills, and railroad yards, wages were low and hours were long. Meat was expensive. Cheese was occasional. But onions were cheap, hearty, and available year-round. For countless laborers, that was enough. The onion sandwich was brutally simple. Paper-thin slices of raw onion layered between two pieces of bread, sometimes spread with butter or a swipe of mustard if it could be spared. A pinch of salt. Maybe cracked pepper. Nothing more. Some workers soaked the slices briefly in cold water to soften the bite, but many didn't bother. The sting was part of it. It wasn't just food, it was practical. Onions traveled well. They didn't spoil quickly. And the strong smell acted as an unspoken security system. In crowded job sites where lunch pails sat side by side, few attempted to steal a sandwich that announced itself so loudly. 4 coal miners descending before dawn, factory workers standing at machines for 10-hour shifts, and farmhands laboring in summer heat, the onion sandwich delivered something essential, enough fuel to keep going. The carbohydrates from bread, the sharp jolt of onion, crude, but effective. Children of working families sometimes carried them to school too, wrapped in wax paper. They may have felt embarrassed, but at home, it was understood. This is what we have. Today, it sounds harsh, but in its simplicity lived endurance. The onion sandwich wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to sustain, and for many families, that was more than enough. Bread and butter sandwich, when almost nothing had to be enough. There were days when the cupboard held bread, a small crock of butter, and little else. On those days, the bread and butter sandwich became more than a snack. It became a quiet act of stretching what remained. During the Great Depression and later through wartime rationing, butter was precious. Sugar was limited. Meat was uncertain. But if flour and a bit of cream had made their way into the kitchen, families could manage this simple meal. 2 slices of bread, spread carefully with softened butter, pressed together and served without apology. The details mattered. Butter had to be softened just enough so it wouldn't tear the bread. Some mothers sprinkled a faint dusting of salt across the surface to sharpen the flavor. Others toasted the bread lightly on a cast iron stove so the butter would melt into the crumb, creating warmth that felt larger than the portion itself. For children heading to school during the 1940s, these sandwiches often filled metal lunch tins. They weren't impressive. They didn't trade well in the cafeteria. But they were dependable. And in uncertain times, dependability meant everything. In some homes, bread and butter was served as supper when paychecks fell short. Parents ate slowly, pretending satisfaction so their children would not sense worry. The simplicity carried dignity. No complaints. No waste. Today, it sounds plain. But plain was the point. It proved that even when options were few, care could still exist in preparation. A smooth spread of butter. A neatly cut square. A meal made from almost nothing, yet given with intention. Sometimes survival did not shout. It arrived quietly, between 2 humble slices of bread. Ketchup sandwich, sweetness in hard times. There were moments during the Great Depression when even butter was a luxury. When cupboards echoed and pay envelopes came home thin, children still needed something to carry to school. That was when the ketchup sandwich quietly appeared. 2 slices of white bread. A thin layer of ketchup spread carefully from corner to corner. Nothing more. To modern ears, it sounds like a joke. But in the 1930s, ketchup was affordable, shelf-stable, and packed with flavor. Tomatoes, vinegar, sugar, salt. It delivered sweetness and tang in a way that felt more exciting than plain bread alone. For families with little cash and fewer options, it became a small illusion of variety. Some parents toasted the bread to make it feel heartier. Others sprinkled a touch of sugar over the ketchup to make it taste closer to dessert. The goal wasn't nutrition. It was comfort. A bright red layer against pale bread looked cheerful in an otherwise gray time. In crowded schoolrooms, children unwrapped wax paper and tried not to compare lunches. Some felt embarrassed. Others didn't think twice, because nearly everyone was struggling in some way. What mattered was having something to eat at all. Older generations later recalled ketchup sandwiches with a strange mix of humor and tenderness. They laughed about them, but they also remembered what they represented. Parents doing their best when there was very little to give. The ketchup sandwich wasn't glamorous. It wasn't balanced. But it was proof of effort, of stretching a bottle on the pantry shelf into one more day of full stomachs. And in hard times, even a little sweetness between 2 slices of bread could feel like a victory. Mayonnaise and banana sandwich, Southern ingenuity on a budget. When you hear mayonnaise and banana, your first thought might be hesitation. But for many families in the rural South during the Great Depression and into the 1940s, this unlikely combination was a staple that stretched limited resources while providing nourishment. Bananas were inexpensive and often imported in small quantities, arriving at general stores in brown paper wrappers. Mayonnaise, a small jar of creamy richness, could turn a single fruit into a filling, satisfying meal. Mothers carefully sliced bananas lengthwise, laying the soft fruit evenly on slices of bread, then spread just enough mayonnaise to add creaminess without overpowering the natural sweetness. Sometimes a pinch of sugar or honey made a rare appearance for special occasions. The balance was delicate. Too much mayonnaise, and the sandwich became heavy. Too little, and it lacked richness. For children heading to school or for adults taking a lunch to the fields, it was both practical and surprisingly flavorful. Its creamy texture and subtle sweetness masked the poverty it represented, transforming scarcity into a comforting, memorable meal. Elvis Presley later famously enjoyed a variation with peanut butter, but long before celebrity influence, families in towns and rural communities depended on this sandwich. It was easy to assemble, traveled well in wax paper, and offered a small sense of indulgence when little else was available. Beyond practicality, the mayonnaise and banana sandwich reflected resourcefulness and adaptability. It turned a simple pantry into a stage for culinary creativity. In homes where every ingredient was precious, this combination offered balance, flavor, and enough sustenance to carry a family through the day. To us, it seems strange. To those who lived it, it was normal, comforting, and necessary. In its simplicity lay the ingenuity of survival, proof that even limited ingredients could be transformed into something more than bare sustenance. Tomato sandwich, a taste of seasonal abundance. When summer arrived, gardens across America became small treasures. Among the crops that defined these fleeting months, tomatoes held a special place. For families enduring lean winters and tight budgets, the tomato sandwich was a rare celebration of abundance. This simple creation began with bread, often homemade or lightly toasted, to provide a sturdy foundation. Ripe tomatoes, still warm from the sun, were sliced thickly and layered generously between the slices. A pinch of salt, sometimes a dab of butter or a smear of mayonnaise if available, enhanced the natural sweetness and juiciness. No elaborate seasoning was needed, the tomato itself was the star. In southern homes, tomato sandwiches were eaten daily during the summer harvest. Children carried them to school, their sandwiches wrapped carefully in wax paper to preserve the juice-soaked bread. In Midwestern kitchens, butter sometimes replaced mayonnaise, producing a subtler flavor but equally cherished result. Every bite reminded families of fleeting summer warmth and the rewards of hard labor in the garden. Preparing a tomato sandwich was a ritual. Wash the tomato. Slice it evenly. Toast or butter the bread. Sprinkle salt just right. These small gestures turned a simple meal into an experience, a moment of sensory delight in otherwise modest days. For children, the sandwich was both nourishment and excitement. For parents, it was a reminder that scarcity could coexist with joy. The tomato sandwich bridged hunger and satisfaction, poverty and the fleeting pleasure of abundance. Today, it might seem mundane or nostalgic. But for those who grew up with it, the tomato sandwich carries memory, ritual, and connection. Between two slices of bread, families found a taste of summer, a taste of resilience, and a small, bright reminder that even in scarcity, life could be sweet. Peanut butter and pickle sandwich, creativity in scarcity. When resources ran thin, families had to get creative. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich, strange to modern ears, was a surprising solution born from necessity. In rural and working-class households, this unusual combination provided flavor, texture, and sustenance without stretching the budget. Peanut butter offered protein and calories, while pickles, whether dill, sweet, or home-canned, added crunch, acidity, and moisture. Together, they created a balance that made each bite interesting and satisfying. Mothers and grandmothers would spread peanut butter evenly across the bread, then layer thin slices of pickles, sometimes pressing gently so the flavors melded just enough. It wasn't about elegance, it was about making two inexpensive ingredients feel like a complete meal. For children heading to school or teens walking long miles to work, the sandwich was portable, filling, and oddly comforting. Unlike meat-heavy sandwiches, it didn't spoil easily, making it practical for long days away from home. And because pickles could be produced from home gardens or purchased cheaply, it was a reliable solution during tight times. This sandwich also taught ingenuity. It encouraged experimentation with flavor contrasts, showing that even the humblest ingredients could produce something unexpectedly enjoyable. Some families added a touch of sugar or a thin spread of butter alongside the peanut butter, elevating the sandwich while still stretching every resource. To modern audiences, it may sound strange, even unappetizing. But for generations who grew up with it, the peanut butter and pickle sandwich represents resilience, resourcefulness, and the creativity that hard times demanded. Every bite was a lesson in making do, finding satisfaction in small pleasures, and turning scarcity into something memorable. What seems unusual today was once a clever, practical, and even cherished staple, a reminder that necessity often breeds the most inventive and enduring culinary traditions. Sardine and egg sandwich, protein when it mattered most. In times when meat was scarce and every calorie counted, the sardine and egg sandwich emerged as a practical powerhouse. Particularly among immigrant communities and working-class families, this combination provided essential protein, long-lasting flavor, and a sense of fullness that few other affordable foods could match. Canned sardines, widely available by the early 20th century, were inexpensive, shelf-stable, and packed with nutrients. Hard-boiled eggs, whether from a backyard chicken coop or purchased in small quantities, added richness and substance. Together, mashed and lightly seasoned, they could stretch across several slices of bread, feeding hungry children or laborers heading into long, demanding days. Preparation required care. Sardines were drained and flaked, eggs chopped finely, and the two combined with a touch of mayonnaise, a dash of vinegar, or a sprinkle of pepper. Some families added onion, celery, or even a hint of mustard for extra flavor. Each variation reflected the household's taste and ingenuity, turning a simple, humble sandwich into a reliable, protein-rich meal. For factory workers, miners, and farmhands, this sandwich traveled well. Wrapped in wax paper or tucked into a lunch pail, it survived the day's heat or cold, providing energy when options were limited. For children, it introduced strong flavors early, teaching them to appreciate simple but nourishing food. The sardine and egg sandwich was more than sustenance. It was a quiet testament to resourcefulness and resilience. Families learned to combine ingredients thoughtfully, balancing taste, nutrition, and availability. It connected households to old-world culinary traditions while adapting to the realities of American scarcity. Today, it may seem unusual or even unappealing, but for those who relied on it, the sardine and egg sandwich was a lifeline, a practical, nourishing, and surprisingly satisfying creation born from necessity and ingenuity. It reminds us that in hard times, every bite counted, and creativity often defined survival. Fried Spam sandwich, wartime necessity turned comfort. When Spam first appeared in 1937, it wasn't glamorous. It was affordable, shelf-stable, and perfectly suited for families stretching every dollar during the Depression. But during World War II, it became much more than a pantry staple. It became a lifeline. Thin slices of Spam, fried until the edges curled and crisped, were layered between slices of white bread. Sometimes a smear of mustard or mayonnaise added richness, but often the fried meat alone was enough. For soldiers overseas, Spam provided a reliable protein source, and for families at home, it fed children, farmhands, and factory workers alike. The fried Spam sandwich traveled well. Wrapped in wax paper, it fit neatly into lunch pails and could survive long days without refrigeration. Its savory, slightly salty flavor contrasted perfectly with the soft, neutral bread, making it more than mere sustenance. It became comfort food in uncertain times. In Hawaii, returning soldiers and local communities elevated the sandwich further, pairing it with pineapple or rice, creating variations that reflected regional tastes. On the mainland, fried Spam sandwiches reminded families of rationing, wartime sacrifices, and the ingenuity required to feed a household with limited ingredients. What made this sandwich enduring wasn't luxury. It was reliability. Hunger could strike at any time, and the fried Spam sandwich was always ready. Crispy edges, salty flavor, and the satisfaction of a full belly. It symbolized adaptation and perseverance. Even after the war ended, many Americans kept the tradition alive. It wasn't gourmet, but it was familiar, nostalgic, and comforting. Today, it represents a unique intersection of necessity and memory, a reminder that some of the simplest meals can tell the most complex stories of resilience, community, and survival. Between two slices of bread, fried Spam carried families through rationing, labor, and long days, proving that practicality often leaves the most lasting culinary legacy. Tuna salad sandwich, stretching every bite. When fresh meat was scarce and rationing limited options, the tuna salad sandwich became a clever and practical solution for American families. By the early 20th century, canned tuna had made its way into pantries nationwide, offering an affordable source of protein that could feed a family without breaking the budget. Preparation was simple but thoughtful. Tuna was drained and flaked, then combined with a bit of mayonnaise, sometimes with chopped celery, onion, or a dash of vinegar to add flavor and moisture. The mixture was spread generously between slices of bread, sometimes with lettuce or a slice of tomato if the household was lucky. The goal was to stretch a small amount of protein across multiple meals, turning a modest ingredient into a filling, satisfying lunch. During World War II, tuna salad sandwiches became even more important. With meat rationing in effect, families relied on tuna to provide essential nutrients. Navy wives, factory workers, and children heading to school all benefited from this inexpensive but hearty option. Leftovers were often repurposed creatively, spread on crackers, mixed into salads, or layered on bread for another sandwich. The tuna salad sandwich also carried a sense of community. Recipes and techniques were shared between neighbors, across church potlucks, and at school lunch counters. It taught households to balance flavor, nutrition, and economy, making the most of what was available while keeping everyone fed. To modern tastes, it might seem ordinary, even mundane. But during hard times, it was a quiet hero. Reliable, nutritious, and versatile, the tuna salad sandwich provided energy for long days of work or school and comfort in its familiarity. Every bite told a story of adaptation, ingenuity, and survival, proof that even modest ingredients, when used thoughtfully, could nourish bodies and preserve dignity in a world where resources were scarce. These 10 sandwiches may seem strange today, but for our grandparents, they were more than food. They were survival, creativity, and comfort in lean times. From lard on bread to fried Spam and tuna salad, each bite tells a story of resourcefulness, family care, and resilience. They remind us that even the humblest ingredients can bring nourishment, joy, and connection. By rediscovering these forgotten meals, we honor the quiet ingenuity of past generations and the way food carried them through hardship. Maybe next time, between two slices of bread, you'll taste history itself.